welcome back to another episode of Chatterbox with me, Mel Biggs. This is the podcast where every month I get to sit down with a folk musician from across the UK and Europe and interview them about themselves, their music, their background, and everything that goes into them as a human being. This month, my guest is the coolest person on the planet. It is Leija Lautamaja from Finland. I have followed her on Instagram for many, many years and just admired her from a great distance. And this is actually the first time I've ever spoken to her. We've exchanged a couple of comments in the 10 or so years that we've known each other. But yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. What an incredible culture that they have over there. And yeah, we shared a lot of really interesting things. And I'm just really grateful to Leija for her time and for her kindness as well. So I'm going to get straight into it. This is Leija Lautamaja from Finland. I am so grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you and get to know you better and introduce you to my little patch of the internet where I reside in my Melodeon geekdom. I want to start off by asking you, because I think you're possibly the coolest person I've ever met within the folk world. And I want to start by asking you how that came to be. Have you always been super cool, or is it something that you dreamt of being one day and then through circumstances you became this incredible folk punk alt rock goddess? Or tell me more about how you have come to be.
Wow. First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Basically, I've just always done what I wanted to. That's
amazing.
That's it. But I grew up in the living tradition of folk music, and especially strong in my home area is the box tradition. So that's where I started playing, and my dad plays and played in several bands, and he's even a Finnish champion of rock music from 80s.
Amazing.
So I've always looked up to him, of course, and that all punk attitude, I guess, comes a lot from there. And also, I guess, a big part of how I've grown up is the county where I come from, that's called Southern Ostrobothnia. It's in southwest in Finland. And I often say, it's like Scotland of Finland. We would be independent if we could.
Yeah.
People have strong accent, and it's very forward going and persistent mindset. And I've really connected to that identity for such a long time.
Well, I can imagine as well growing up with your dad. When you say a champion folk punk, punk player, is there, I know that there are folk competitions and awards and things. Is that the same in Finland for all music, or is that?
There used to be rock championship, and it used to be very important in 70s and 80s. New bands came up through that competition, and there are some bands, or many bands actually, who still play, who did well in that competition. So it's a cultural phenomenon. Sadly, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. But it's inspired you to take it forward, and you have just been nominated for one of the Emma Awards as well. That's coming up in March, which is incredible. That's for your solo album, isn't it?
Yeah.
I listened to a bit of that today, and it's just so different to your other music. You say about this independence, this cultural independence, and that's obviously a mindset that you've come up with through the ranks and through the age. But do you find how you settle with your, the traditional music and then the punk and the rock? Is that sort of two separate identities, or is it all Leija? Is it just all you, and you have different outlets for different expressions and different amounts of creativity and different ways of expressing that creativity?
That's a very interesting question. Let's see. I think it's all me, and all kind of different periods of time when all these different things have been stronger, and then at this point they just all exist. But when I it just accidental that I happened to be born in Alavus, and my family, like my grandfather, played accordion, so I wanted to play that, and therefore I grew up with folk music, which is a great thing to to grow up with. And of course, I'm also educated, like I have a master in folk music, and that has been there for such a long time, and it's such a strong thing. And now that I've been graduated for almost 10 years and like kind of a bit out from that circle, it's like different things start to come up, and I remembered my old dreams, like that I also really like to write songs, and I really like the Finnish language, and I've always read tons of books, and that's also important. And therefore I wanted to make my solo album, which was for that side, like writing songs and kind of seeing, like, if I don't think these need to be Scottish or polskas or in like folk music groups, what would come up? Like, what would be the music be if I just wanted to write as good songs as I can? And also, of course, it's a huge impact of PK Keränen, with whom I have the Moontwins duo. He's also one of those rock champions. When PK asked me if I could try to play with him, it was so huge for my Melodeon playing, because someone else from some totally other genre saw my instrument as a real instrument and not just like curiosity or limited or whatsoever. And you know, he can put his capo wherever, and it can be F sharp major, and he's like, this is a nice song, can we play? And I'm like, okay, fine.
Give me a few hours. So does that mean that you have, I mean, I say that the Melodeon equivalent of a capo, what he has on the guitar, is just buy another instrument, but obviously you have the 18 bass box. Do you play in all keys on that? I'd imagine maybe with your masters that you are very capable on that instrument. Of course you would be, but in terms of playing in all keys, is that something that you feel comfortable doing? Or
Yes, I've
amazing.
over past 10 years I've really tried to develop that, and it actually started in England. I was in exchange in Newcastle. And
On the folk degree.
yeah,
Fantastic.
I was there for a full year in 13, 14. And before that, it's been very common here, you know, just play in G, because our boxes are usually GC. So we play in that, and that's it. And then when I was there, I had help, Ian Stevenson.
Yeah, Ian Stevenson, yes.
Yes, and Julian Sutton as my teachers, and also had a couple of lessons with Karen Tweed. But like Ian and Julian both made me, like, it was so natural for them to play in all keys. And also I started to notice that in the sessions, box player just could join any of the tunes, and I was like, I want to be that.
Yeah.
So that year really changed a lot, and I started to learn and work on that. It's also very pleasant that I can now play with any guitar keys.
Yeah, amazing. And also, like you say, to take it into an alternative world for the Melodeon. I know of only, well, I probably, if I put my head to it, I can think of more, but Skinny Lister, I can't recognise his name right now, but I know I follow him like I did with yourself. I've followed you on Instagram for many years. Skinny Lister and the box player with them, he plays a saltarell, and he's kind of sweaty, torn off clothes, and he's there with this accordion. Yes. And it's just this other world to kind of put it on that stage, and like you say, just have the reaction of everyone looking at it and listening to everything that it can do.
Bego has sometimes asked, like, what if you played the 5-row, like the chromatic button accordion, because I played that for a couple of years in my teenage as well. it's like I can't say I'm really good, but I know where the notes exist. And I was like, yeah, no, it's the very big part of the charm that even though I can play a lot of things, I still can't play all the basses in all the places and do all these things. So it's like I often see that people describe my playing in that band like minimalistic and whatsoever, and I'm like, that's just the part of my instrument. It's not necessarily my choice of playing, but it's the instrument, and that's cool.
But also, I would argue that there's so much that you offer in I call it like the basket that holds everything together, the groove. Like it's such a massive part of, of what holds everything else together. And without that bellows direction change, which the diatonic gives us, that is that something that is traditional. I'd love to talk a little bit more about your region and this 2-row style, and I've seen pictures of you in full traditional regalia, and your ENKEL bandmate, is it Mia? Is that her correct pronunciation? Tell me a bit more about how you grew up together in this 2-row tradition, and how maybe this rhythmical sort of artifact from the music comes through.
Yeah, so me and my best friend, Mia Palomäki, we started both playing when we were 6 years old. We can give a lot of credit to Leija Lautamaja, who's, I think she's 70 years old now. And she's been such a powerhouse in that area. She's been teaching hundreds and hundreds of Melodeon players around the Finland, but mostly in our area. And when I was kid, in our tiny village, even there was their own Melodeon group.
Wow.
So it was very easy to go there. And Mia's big sister played the box already. And I think she had some kind of motivation problem or something. So her parents took her to my grandfather for some reason to play with him at our house. We lived in the same house. So I met Mia there, and then we started playing at the same time. And then we've been through all the schools and even the university together and playing different bands together still. The traditional style, I'd say it's very much based on chords. You always aim that you can play the right chord for the whole time, like compared to what I've understood, for example, Irish style is like that you play the melody and then if you can, you hit the chord, like if it fits. But it's very much other way around.
So it's not about right hand chords. Sorry, that was it's the way the left hand bass end works with the melody. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we really want to hit the basses all the time, and therefore there is maybe a bit less of the in and out and rhythmical bellow than there could be. It's a very strong style, like still rhythmically, but it's not based that much on bellows and in and out. But it's like
how do you get that groove in there from the instrument?
I'd say it's a very strong right hand fingers. Like that's very significant. And often tunes are quite fast, so it comes like very
yeah. I was listening to some of the Finnish polskas on the latest or I can't remember which one now, but some of the Floating Sofa Quartet albums, and I could hear the speed, which was impressive, but then I could sense how much the fingers were having to hammer on the keys to really get that speed and accuracy. And
yeah, that's something that's really in the style, I think. Yeah, and of course then there are tons of personal styles. But
is it so much matched to the dance, the traditional Melodeon playing specifically? Does it match the dances? I mean, I am completely ignorant, I must admit, to specific Finnish dances and like regional stylistics. I'd love to talk a bit about how that marries up with the dance? Because I know that you are a very passionate dancer, as am I, but specifically the Finnish stuff, how does it match up?
That's a good question. The music I've played all my life is dance music, like all
Yeah,
these
like
waltzes.
most folk music. I'd say all folk
Exactly.
music.
Waltzes, Scottishes, polkas, whatsoever. But it's still been such a strong culture of like having these folk competitions and these folk heroes and who's the best player and who's the king fiddler and like all that. And of course, there has been dance, but I think the dance has kind of disappeared earlier than pop heroes of folk world have still gone strong. Um, so actually, it was for me personally, it was only through Floating Sofa Quartet because the Danish people had a lot of like dance teaching in their education, and they were very familiar with playing for dance, and we did a lot of that kind of gigs when we started and still do. And I just started thinking like if every tiny German village has a like folk dance club where they dance Nordic dances, why don't we have this in Finland? And
Yeah.
only through that it gave me such a more deep layer and relationship to that music that I had grown with when I realized it actually, because I know how the dances feel in my body and how amazing it is when it goes well and you
Yeah.
have the partner and you really look
Yeah.
and the music is great. And then I was like, oh yeah, but I know this music. And then suddenly it started to feel the same to play them as I feel when I dance
Mm.
them. And that was such a big like realization in my head.
When did that happen? What age were you? I mean, if you say that dance died out, did you grow up with folk dance in a same way? Were your parents taking you to events, or did you find them yourself in your teens? Or
Like this realization happened only like 2017, 18,
okay,
like quite recently. That just like combining these things. Um, but I've learned to dance as a kid, and that's also like with our accordion group. We used to play a lot of gigs, like always when there was a festival or whatever, we went there. And as the two kids, me and Mia, we were often quite bored because there was a lot of time to wait and we couldn't get into the concerts because there was alcohol. So we like the only places where we usually could go were the places where there was dance. So we went there and then we were just like miming the like, oh, they do that, let's try. And I think that's the how I've learned to dance. And then I've just always liked it. It was also very fun to realize that when we started to play more for dancing, like in Sweden and Denmark, and also other where in Europe, that I have all this information in my body, and now that I just have to use it.
I love learning in that style of just getting up and having a go, and it's something that I bring into my teaching as a Melodeon teacher, just to try and help people over that barrier, and it's full of fun to do it like that. But I think if we've grown up with it, we're kind of lucky in that sense. We've learned that confidence to have a go. And
yeah, but just to add to that, like if they were combined, the dance and the music, we have played with that traditional box group. We've played sometimes for dance, but then it's been like slightly different repertoire, like tangos, humpas, like a bit of this 1920s Schlager kind of, and that's like what they would dance in a dance hall these days.
yeah,
Or and then as a curiosity, some Scottish or one mazurka, but that's
yeah,
it. So it's not been really connecting in that way. And it's weird because at the same time, there has been also, like when I was growing up in Alavus, my hometown, there were many folk dance groups, like all age groups had their own big and active group. So it's been existing, but it's been still not the social side hasn't been so strong. That's been really raising in Finland for the past 2-3 years. Like after COVID, I'd say it's
Wow.
been really, you can see the scene is growing, but it's been more like the performative side of folk dance that's been the strong before.
It's interesting you say this because I was going to ask you. I've also grown up with folk music. I appreciate you might not know that. I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, but it's something that it forms who you become, and all the experiences I've had through meeting people socially, but also what I've ended up doing in my career. I'm not a professional musician who's trained. I did a GCSE music, which is like the first qualification that you get as a teenager. So I have that in music, but I didn't take it to university or anything. Mostly for me in England, my opinion is that it's a social, casual hobby that people have. Generally, I came through Morris dancing. I don't know if you got to see any of that while you were over. There's the traditional English dances. So I grew up through that. And as part of that, there are festivals, but it's all just, there is a performance, but it's almost performing to ourselves to a certain degree. There's no stages, there's no competitions. And then afterwards you go to the pub to play tunes together and have a kind of socialising through music and sharing tunes that way. And that's really the culture that I've grown up with and that I think prevails over any other kind of performative music in England. You understand what I mean? There's obviously professionals who perform and we tour and all of that, but like the real heartbeat is this less academic approach is what I'm trying to say. I feel like from what you said already that that's almost the opposite in Finland, but is there still this casual session scene, festivals that you just meet just to play music, or is there always been this competition, this kind of accordion clubs, dance clubs to kind of aim towards performing? Is that mostly where that culture exists?
Yes and no. I'd say like the group where I grew up with, that's the closest you could get to that kind of like social, just meeting together, gathering. But that's also, it's been under a kind of institute. You sign up for this class, you turn up every week and play together, and then we have the performances and all that. But it's still very like social, and usually those people really carry that music in the heart, and then when we paint someone's house, we also play the boxes.
Yeah.
When it's the break. If you enter a folk festival in Finland, most of them are pretty much like it's a stage and there's a performance of a band or of a folk dance group. And of course, then there are some sessions, and yeah, it's also a different scene for sessions with more contemporary players or like educated people, and then there are these fiddler groups.
Yeah, more traditional groups.
Who really come there. They don't care about the performances. They come and meet each other, like the people they only meet at that festival every year, kind of. But those people are often quite old already. So there has been maybe a fear that that tradition that you just described is kind of dying out, that it's only the professionals and then these old people who still do it for fun. But luckily, also as the social folk dance, that kind of social playing has also now, the scene has been growing a lot, which is very much thanks to Orivesi All Stars, which is a huge group of amateur musicians. Orivesi courses are legendary folk music courses between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay.
It's a big event. It's been going on for 40 years or so. There, Antti Järvelä, who plays with Frick and played and other bands, he started like this big group where he makes cool arrangements of trad tunes, and you can join with any instrument. And that phenomenon has really grown a lot. So there are hundreds of people there, and those people are very eager to play and have sessions and be everywhere. And also they become a great audience for us professionals.
Yeah, really enthusiastic.
Yes.
They're just there whooping along, dancing along, whatever. It sounds really interesting to me. I love talking about how other cultures have the same, folk, people meeting, people playing together, but this disparity between, like you say, the educated, the academics, and then, the traditionalists, and that balance, in England, it's we have academics, of course we do, and that grows every year. And the number of courses, I think we have our folk hubs, Bristol and Sheffield, probably Oxford being some of the biggest, Newcastle as well. I always consider Newcastle, it's out of my territory, maybe a bit out of my league potentially, because it's more akin with Scottish music. It's Northern English music, but it's the speed and the style is not what I know. So I struggle to kind of get in with that music. But I have friends in Newcastle who play my kind of stuff, and they're learning and training to become much better musicians than I will ever be, because they have the time and the expertise to put into it. I think one of the things I've realised, I got myself a Handry 18 in 2022 after years of playing only 2-row 8 bass, and I'm really enjoying approaching it in a more academic way. I don't put the time in, but I'm really liking to learn in different keys, things that I wouldn't normally get to play in, and just treating it as this puzzle box to solve all over again. And I'm writing some new things that are testing my skills. So it's that sort of thing. You reach, mid-30s and you're like, oh, if only I had my time again and I didn't choose science at university, which is what I did, and I chose arts or music, maybe it would have been different. But I'm not regretful at all. It's just having the time, and you're looking at how things can evolve quite rapidly when you only can dedicate yourself to this thing. I take it your undergraduate was also in music as well.
Yes, it's like we apply to whole master's program at once. Okay. So it's like, when you apply for 5.5 years.
Wow. Go through. I know, and I think you know him too, Tommy Blackroff, who did his masters in Helsinki.
Yeah, we were there a bit. We were overlapping a bit. Yes.
Another incredible chromatic accordionist and singer. If for anyone else, he's from Cornwall, but he lives predominantly in Helsinki, and he's an amazing player.
Also, very good dancer.
Yes, yeah, amazing. We haven't had the opportunity, me and him, but I think the Balfolk scene in England, which is where I say Balfolk, yes, it's predominantly French dance, but there's a lot of interest in bringing Scandinavian dance into that. It's growing, it's on the up in England. There are a lot more clubs opening specifically for that type of dance. Just interrupting very quickly to let you know that there has been a huge chunk of this interview edited out, and it is made available via the extended edition, which you can get via subscribing to my Patreon. You can get the RSS private link, which means you can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, and this month you're going to get about 20 minutes extra. It's a pretty massive chunk. And it's all about more geekery on the Melodeon, more geekery around Finnish trad and Norwegian and Scandinavian trad and that kind of thing. There's loads more tidbits of really interesting things that me and Leija got chatting about. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description to my Patreon, and I'll see you there. Now back to the interview. Have you been across and taken part in any festivals? I know that you've travelled extensively with your bands, but have you been to England at all?
No. Not really after my exchange year. We were trying to get to a festival last year and it almost worked out, but something happened. So we are really eager to come this year with Floating Sofa. We have the 10 years anniversary.
Yeah, congrats.
And it would be so nice, like we all admire the English music as well, and it's such a huge influence, and of course Baltic Crossing being idol of ours. So
you are so loved here as well. As it's just that kind of, I can't remember how I discovered you, but it must have been through some of my accordion nerd friends that just put a CD in my hand one day, and I recognised you immediately. But the music, the melodies that you guys come up with, either traditional or contemporary things that you guys have written, I never skip a track, which is quite rare. There's always something on an album you're like, okay, I've heard it, I don't need to hear it again. But I'm addicted to the fact that you guys write and find such gorgeous melodies. I'm curious to know, how does it work working together across 3 separate countries? Are you rarely together, or do you kind of meet online a lot? How does it kind of work?
Well, when we got an idea of the band, I was really driven and I really wanted to make it happen. And I often think like, wow, I was so brave when I was 23. Like, I applied for fundings and I got this some kind of Nordic funding to travel to Denmark for 10 days. So I basically took my box and harmonium and traveled to an island in Denmark to the people I didn't know at all for 10 days. Which is like, when you think of it now, like 30 plus, it's like, whoa, I don't know if I'd do that again.
Yeah.
For that week and a half, we played together, and of course everyone brought their forever best tunes in what they had written, and we created that first repertoire. That's basically our first album. The Moon We Watch is the same.
You're about to release your 4th album, is that correct? Or you're working on your 4th album. You kind of know how each other works, and there is that real kind of connection. 10 years in, yeah, of course there would be. So
yeah, exactly. And this last album, we've recorded it, like with the 10 years anniversary album is coming in the autumn.
And then for the last album that you released, was it last year, you introduced a 5th member of the band, a hardanger player called, I'm going to just say Guro, I hope that that's correct. How was it introducing a 5th member, and what did that open up for you as a band?
The history of that project was that we played in Norway at this showcase festival during COVID, and just day before we had to go, the regulations changed again, and then our fiddler Clara couldn't come. So we asked Gyro, who lives in Oslo, to come and substitute her. And then she fell in love with our music so much that she started to dream of playing her childhood tradition, which is Southern Norwegian tradition, with us. Of course, like, we all have such a nerdy love towards tradition and discovering that it was a huge honor, and it was also a very eye-opening project in that sense, like being introduced to a new tradition by someone our age who has grown up with it. And I just enjoy so much learning from like tradition bearers.
Yeah.
All the things that they've played so much fiddle there with box players, and that's why they've tuned their fiddles one note down, so they play in like G instead of A.
Yeah.
And I've been like, yeah, that's the limitations for you. Like, fiddle can't be changed, so change that.
Now you have to change your fingering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I learned very much from that project. Also, the whole idea was that, like, she brought her tradition, and then we tried to listen very carefully, and then did research in our own countries and like the coastal areas there. Like, could we find even the same tunes? Like, could we imagine that these tunes actually traveled with seamen and 1700s or whatsoever?
Did you find tunes with similarities, or?
Yeah, there's one set that's basically the same tune with different variations from Norway, Denmark, Sweden. Not in Finland though. But there are some mega hits that has been traveled all over. So it's just like, it
Love
all
it.
has traveled.
I love how this kind of folk music travels, but what makes, I mean, have you explored this? You must have done, but within Floating Sofa, with you, well, now ticking all of the Scandinavian boxes, with you having your Norwegian hardanger player as well, what makes a Finnish tune a Finnish tune, a Danish tune, etc.? Are there specifics? Are there, fiddle techniques or box techniques, rhythms, obviously dances, it all kind of comes back to dance. So are there specific feelings that you get from each cultural style?
Definitely. So, such a big question as well.
How could you
I,
simplify it? Like what would you
yeah,
say as a box player? Like how would you approach each?
one big thing is the harmonics. Like, what chords would you choose? That makes, at least for me, that makes a huge difference. And of course, the scales and all that. And of course, then in contemporary music, that all gets more blend because at least I compose so much based on the pop music I've heard and
Yeah.
the chords I love from there, and then that's just how every generation does that. Like to the traditional tunes, I think it's so much for me. The chords make it sound Finnish or Norwegian, or then I can't really start about the Norwegian fiddling styles. That's they have managed to keep up so many local traditions and they really embrace them and are very nerdy about them. So
Yeah.
there are so many styles, and so is in Sweden.
I was going to say Sweden seems to. I don't know much, but I suppose I know the most about Swedish fiddle playing. In that I know bowing marks are really specific on manuscripts, and there's really specific things that have been captured and passed on, and that's what a lot of their competitions revolve around, is how well things are passed on, and there's a lot to be admired in that. But I think there is now this contemporary influence of take it and make it your own. How can you make it feel like your own tradition that you're stepping away from and kind of remaining attached to, but making it your own? And I think that's really important.
Exactly. And like fiddle is very interesting because the fiddle music I've grown up with hearing here, that's like the classical background can be heard very much. Like Kaustinen style is so strong, and it's not far from Alavus where I grew up. And that's you can really hear that they appreciate the good technique and classical and vibrato, and then like realizing like not all, like for example in Norway I don't think many folky fiddlers have classical background, and it's such different sound and almost a different instrument. And of course then in other parts of Finland also the fiddle styles vary a lot, but that's been a big realization, and it's also that's very what significant for the local styles. Box, of course, the what notes you have in your accordion,
Yeah.
that defines a lot. And in the Finnish system we do have the like minor fifth, it's major fifth, but we have E minor, A minor, and then B both ways. And I think that's a huge influence from the East, like Slavic schlagers and those melodies, because we play a lot of minor waltzes in E minor with high sixth, high seventh, those like fingerings, even though you have to take it with your thumb,
Yeah.
which is not very easy. But I'd say for any traditional player, that's very like if you play that kind of phrase, do, 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 it's like they catch it right away, and it's not a problem for them because it's in so many tunes. And of course then, for example, in Sweden they don't have the B at all, they have F instead of that, and not maybe those right hand notes either, I'm not sure about that. But then of course you don't play that kind of waltzes because you don't have the buttons for that.
Yeah.
And therefore the tradition. So that's very specific for the Finnish, I think.
I want to talk a bit about ENKEL. I, as I said, followed you on Instagram for many years, and this image popped up, and I thought, well, that's different. That's not typically folk. I just love the fact that I think from your own website, you've put traditional girl power who bow down to no one, and I was like, yeah, because you just look so badass, all four of you. And I listened to I wanted it fresh in my ears for today, and it's such a different sound, again, to any of your solo work, your floating sofa work. it has its heart in traditional music, but then there's so many other layers that you're all putting to it, and a lot of vocal as well. That's the band that you're singing in. Incredible. And you and Mia are in this band as well as your other musicians. So just take us through how this gorgeous collaboration came together and where this feisty kind of full-bloodedness came from with your music, and what you're speaking about in this band. Like, what's the ethos behind it?
We started forming this band in 2013, but that was the year when we all went to exchange. We had studied, like, with Mia, we've known each other for our whole life, and then with Maija, the kantele player, we had met in the age of 15. We all went to this junior academy thing of Sibelius Academy, so we played in a band there together, and then we met Ida when we started studying the viola player. So we had known each other for some years, and then we did a study trip to Spain with our folk big band that Sibelius Academy had just started when we studied, and the flights were really late. Like, we had super early flights because of course they were cheap and all the flights were late, and people ran around like panicking and trying to solve it, and we four sat in the cafe like, we can't do anything. Why don't we have fun? And there we got this idea, like, we are such relaxed travelers, we should have a band. So that was like the basic idea was based on not instruments or not anything, but more like chemistry and these people. And then for that year when I was in Newcastle, Ida was in Sweden, and me and Maija were somewhere else in Finland, we were like writing a lot and had this Facebook group, and were like thinking of outfits and like philosophies and what do we want to do. And we had such like very strong feministic ideas, like what all things that men usually do we want to do and all that, young and eager. Also, I think that there around like 2010-15 something also started to change in the like in general in folk photos, at least in Finland. Like, up until that, with all respect, but it had been quite like, it's me in my shirt and my instrument, maybe boots, maybe some woolen socks. And then like some of us started to think that, hey, we are actually artists and we can be pop stars and we can look cool. So that was something we put a lot of effort in.
Yeah, well, box ticked. I think kind of like sequins and shiny lurex, gilets and like just neon, anything. I think that's what screams out from those images. And yes. I didn't even need to hear your music to know how it would sound, if that makes sense. It was just kind of there on the page, enticing you in, which is perfect marketing and everything. So
yeah, well, that's nice. It also sounds the same. But we've also now played for 10 years and made 3 albums.
2 of which have won Finnish Folk Album of the Year as well, which is amazing. So clearly that, I say rebranding, you put yourself out there on the map to look different and sound different, I would imagine. That's me saying that without listening to any other Finnish folk bands, but yeah, I can imagine that it's like grabbed people. And I mean, 2 awards surely says that, basically.
One of our strong ideas behind the band was that we wanted to play traditional Finnish music, whatever that is, as we've discovered during this discussion as well. But like, what's being considered, and like, well, me and Mia have the strong box tradition and strong Southern Ostrobothnian tradition, and then Maija has learned different kantele traditions, and Ida is she's then grown up with all kinds of music and then discovered folk music a bit later. So then it's a perfect combination that she brings the art and we bring the tradition. So, but at that point, there weren't really many bands who were playing this kind of like pure trad music. So we really wanted to embrace that because it was very important for all of us. And as a puristic teenager, I remember thinking when I was like 15 and I listened to my favorite folk music albums were and still are Pragmatics, Vaarallinen lehmänkello, where Markku Lepistö plays the box. And then Hyperborea, their 2 albums. And all those, and also some Markku Lepistö's solo albums, are like just realized all those albums have so much trad and maybe some of their own compositions. And I remember thinking as 15-year-old, why would you ever compose when there is so much good trad? Like, or if you do, it must be better.
Yeah.
We really wanted to kind of bring that back because not, or like make that our thing because not so many at that point were doing that.
Did you all 4 of you have, obviously you can all sing, but was the vocal traditions and the singing traditions, that's something we've not talked about in terms of where these songs come from and how they've been recorded and passed on. Is that, like we talked about with instrumentation, is that also something that there's formal groups and socialising, or is it more just familial, like passing on through grandparents or anything like that?
That's interesting. Well, our area is very lucky for that the collectors, like folk music collectors, there has been many of them who have been from my area or just interested in that. So there are many like song collections and sheet music collections that have preserved the Southern Ostrobothnian tradition. And therefore, I think those folk songs are quite well known, at least within the folk world in the whole Finland, because there is a good documentation of them. And of course, like my father's band have made new versions and he sings in dialect and blah, blah, blah. So that's something I could say I've also grown with. That singing style is very everyday like, if you can say so, like the kind of like talking, or if you make too much effort like pop voice then it just sounds wrong. It should be just like here we are together in this room. We are the same age. We were huge folk music fans. Like we always met at the festivals, went to the same gigs, admired the same people. So we really share the how we like it to sound, like how we think the folk songs should be sang, kind of.
That must be nice to kind of, like you say, bring the other influences, but if you're all on the same page for the tradition and kind of not necessarily keeping it sacred, but kind of, you know, keeping it pure to a point, you know, and letting that live and breathe within everything else, like the shiny spangliness of everything else that you're putting on top of it. I can't remember the specific track, and I apologise for that, but it just kind of hit me how cleverly you'd like layered these different voices. I really liked how that was presented, but then you've got these really funky kind of like bass lines and things that are coming through. The cantella is really interesting. It sounds like an auto harp, but I couldn't find a picture of it online. What does it actually look like to play?
Big auto harp, no. The kind of kantele Maija plays in our band, she plays also other kinds of kantele, but like she has it with a strap around her neck.
So she can rock out with it.
It's here.
Yeah.
on her lap. And yeah, isn't it the same system than in auto harp? Like the strings you don't want to be heard, you dimp. So
okay.
Then you just play the strings you want in the chord.
Nice. And that's traditionally Finnish?
Yeah, and Finno-Ugrian, I think that's like bagpipe or jute harp. They've existed everywhere. Like people had a piece of wood and some guts, and they made a kantele.
Yeah.
like in Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Russia probably there are different variants, and of course they have different names, but basically the same instrument.
I really have so loved this conversation. I could carry on talking to you, but I'm looking at the time and I know that we have to go and teach a Melinar. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in my outro because it's going to be amazing. You're doing Nordic Polska grooves. So if anyone is listening that wants to take part in that, you will have missed the live because that is this evening as we're recording this, but you'll be able to get the recording. About traditions and about how you've grown up with traditions in Finland and those kind of cultural events. Are they ritualistic around the seasons? Because obviously I appreciate, and I don't know actually, I didn't do my research well enough. Do you have 24-hour darkness at any point in the year? Do you? I think you're too far south for that, aren't you? But you obviously have pretty severe weather that must mean you live indoors quite a lot at certain times of the year. So seasonally, how are folk traditions, rituals, things that happen throughout the year, how does that happen in Finland, and what does that look like?
I can see that question coming from an English person.
Yeah, because it's so prevalent in England. You know, it's almost like every week there's something to observe.
Exactly.
But I don't know if it's the same.
No, it is, and I don't know why. And I've been so true about the English traditions. Like I had this newsletter coming, and I'm like, wow, all this, and like all the rituals I learned to do like maypole traditions and whatsoever. I was like,
and it's for me, it's the beasts and like the costumes and the, you know, the story, the crazy eccentric stories that happen with some of these traditions, and some of them are more modern than others, so they're kind of really crazy things that happen. But obviously are for us events that music and dance happen at, more times to meet up, more times to share and socialise with everything. But also there are like specific music and specific dance that can go along with a lot of these rituals. So it just intrigued me. That's my knowledge of folk. So that's how it happens everywhere, but maybe not.
It's interesting now that I start to think of it. Of course, if I read a book like old folk tales from Southern Ostrobothnia, of course there are all these sayings and rhymes and songs about specific, like, this is how you make your cow milk well, or or you should do this to make the witches not come to your cow house.
Lots of dairy and cow kind of related content. Okay.
Yes. But since there are not that many cow houses anymore,
the witches got in. Oh no.
Yeah, but that's interesting. I can't even think of so many like folky Christmas songs. Of course, there are some.
If it's not folk, I mean, there must be getting together and socialising, not necessarily folk or music, but just kind of to keep up spirits in the darkness of winter, which goes on for ages for you guys. So what kind of...
Might be, but it's also, someone could fact check, but I think it has a lot, or the Finnish culture has a lot to do with the religious movements, that they were so strong, like around the First and Second World Wars. All these kind of more pagan traditions or folky traditions, even dancing, like they were killed, they disappeared. And as the only country in world, Finland had dance forbidden for like 10 years even, like around the Second World War, because in any other country you would think that dancing would keep the spirits up and make you feel happy.
Well, exactly,
But here, people thought that it's disrespectful to dance on boys' graves.
Which I can also understand as well, but that's extreme, like, isn't it? Yeah.
Of course, people had their secret dances in their cabins, and then the police came and shoot people because they were dancing. Like, what? So it's been very colored by these extreme religious movements, and also like some political movements who have thought that people need to like behave and not to play poker and have sex because that makes them bad.
I mean, do you think that's a revelation to me? I'd never heard that before. But do you think that plays into the fact that you're only just seeing social dance returning? I don't know. I mean, is that something that's...
It might be, I think, because
if it's our generation bringing that back, then that would be 2 generations from the war, from the end of the war. Is that right? So, we're the third generation after.
Yeah.
So
like there, of course, when there was economical crisis in 90s, then people were dancing like crazy. Not folk dances, but like those foxtrot, tango, all that. It was so popular because there, you like on the dance floor, you are equal. No one knows if you've lost all your money or whatever. It's just like that was a huge trend. So like dancing has been there, but not the social folk dancing, because I think it just got so badly hit in these movements, and also why it has been stronger in the performance field or like that kind of folk dance. I think it's because there was this movement, like political countryside movement, where they wanted to make like kind of save the youth of countryside and make them more civilized and whatsoever. So they built these, what do you call them? The houses where you gather together in the countryside. Those. Yeah. And they had these events there, and they tried to make it like only like poetry, some plays, some music performances, but people didn't show up if there wasn't dance. So then they made it also, they were like, okay, you can dance, but it needs to be very like limited. So you can march around the room with your partner. Kind of.
No touching.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's not passionate. So you won't get children out of that. So I think from that movement kind of developed the more performative side, like having these proper costumes, a specific length, dancing, these dances that actually were like ceili dances. We have a very nice, huge collection of those. But if you dance them on stage, they can be quite boring.
Yeah.
You can
I can imagine if they're anything like our ceili dances, they're not for the stage. They're for getting drunk and running around with your mates. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course that then has become like there are folk dance professionals who make great art out of that, and there are very talented groups and who make contemporary folk dance as we make contemporary folk music. But I think that's kind of the background of that kind of folk dancing. And then the social has just, new trend, tango. Who wants to dance polka anymore? It's sweaty. So yes, it's died, and now it's time for a revolution.
That's amazing. I think that I'll leave it on that soundbite. That's incredible. Oh, wow. The socio-political history of Finland. That's what we need to do in Act 2 of this wonderful chat. Yeah, fascinating. Thank you ever so much for everything that you've provided on this wonderful chat. I've really enjoyed it, and I feel like I know you obviously so much better now. And it's been really, really interesting, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy listening to it as well. So thank you, Leija.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, genuinely, I love every single one of these conversations, but that must be one of my absolute favourites that I've done so far. Thank you again to Leija. Go and check her out. She's absolutely phenomenal in every walk that she portrays herself in. You can find all of her links down below, including the link to the Melinar that she gave to my Patreon community, and you can sign up to get the recording of that tutorial if you're interested in Nordic Polska grooves. And I can tell you that it was absolutely amazing. So yeah, if you're interested in that, check it out. My guest tutor this month in March is the wonderful Archie Churchill Moss. Many of you will know him. He plays in many different lineups and he's an absolute fantastic tutor, and I cannot believe that he's said yes to become one of my guest tutors for this fantastic series. He will be on the podcast in April, but on March the 19th he's going to be appearing live via Zoom to teach my Patreon community, which you can be part of by signing up. He's going to be doing a Melinar all about roles, textures and approaches, and that's going to include how to become part of an ensemble and find your individual musical voice, developing parts and working in a group with the Melodeon and working out how all of that can come together. Honestly, he's a really great guy for that. He's a fantastic accompanist but also soloist, and he kind of gets in there and gets all about it basically in the most gorgeous of ways. If you are interested in being part of that Melinar, you can sign up via the link in the show notes and become a member of Mel's Angels on my Patreon and join us on the 19th of March at 7 p.m. UK time. And if you can't make the live, then you can get the recording afterwards. Just a little one from me this month. I just want to let you know that the Folk Unbound Gathering applications opened last month and the early bird prices will end on the 14th of March. So if you want to get in and save yourself a little bit of money and you are a woman or someone who identifies as a marginalised gender, then you are very welcome to apply, and we are really excited. We've had a few applications in already. It's really exciting. Me and Lucy have been planning along with Frankie Inslee, who's going to be joining us as a guest tutor during our week-long music camp residential. So also check that out in the links if you are interested in that. And also, just to let you know, if you fancied some one-to-one lessons with me, I've got a bit of availability at the moment. I've taken on a few new students lately and it's going really well, and I've got some openings in my diary. So if you want to get in touch to work on anything that you might be struggling with or anything that you aspire to, get in touch with me directly and I will really enjoy working with you. That's it from me this month. Thank you so much again for listening, and don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, leave a review if you are listening on a platform that allows that, and leave me a comment, leave me a like on YouTube if you're listening over there. Also subscribe. Don't forget that really important massive red button that says subscribe. That's massively helpful and it really helps me out. So thank you so much to everyone who subscribes. Also thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. You are all fantastic and I couldn't do any of this without you, so thank you so much. I will see you again next month, the first Monday of the month, and with Archie Churchill Moss. Take care everyone. Bye.